Okay, good evening, and apologize for the delay. We just had some last-minute correspondence. I have some opening remarks. The public meeting is being heard by the City Council Planning Advisory Committee, and public notice has been given in accordance with the Planning Act. The non-elected members of the Planning Advisory Committee are Mr. John Baltutis, Mr. David Joyce, Ms. Catherine Brown, and Mr. Paul Jennings. Citizen appointees may ask questions and participate in the discussion in order to assist in making recommendations to City Council, but may not make motions or vote in connection with the public meeting. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Planning Committee or City Council before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of City Council or the local Planning Appeal Board. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Belleville before the related bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. Comments received at this public meeting, as well as written comments, will be considered by the Engineering and Development Services Department in analysis of the applications that were part of the public meeting tonight. A recommendation report will be brought forward upon receipt of all agency and public comments in the future. Any persons wishing to be advised of the Belleville Planning Advisory Committee's recommendations with respect to today's applications are requested to leave their name and address on the appropriate notification sheet located on the clipboard beside the podium. And for attendance, I see all of council present. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll go to public meetings. 3.1, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 125 Mitchell Road, part of lot 25, concession 1, parts 1 to 6, plan 21R-255119, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1097. Applicant is John Shearhorn. Owner is 732 676 Ontario Incorporated. Mr. Deming.
Okay, so, this application, I should just clarify first, 125 Mitchell Road has two zoning applications in relation to 4 consent to sever applications. So the first application is strictly a rezoning application that is condition of consent for 2 applications to create 2 new residential lots. The severed parcels would be rezoned to rural residential, RR zone, and the retained parcel would be rezoned from prime agricultural PA zone to rural RU zone. And the reason for that rezoning is the official plan actually has the lands as rural and not agricultural. So rezoning to rural is more in line with the official plan.
Thank you. Is anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? You come forward, just press the microphone, activate it, please.
I'm John Shearhorn. I'm the owner of the property, and I just wish to, I've submitted the application. I'm here more for comments or questions that you might have, so I'd like to move to be in favor of that application.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions of Mr. Shearhorn? No? Okay, no, I don't see any. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application?
Hi, I'm Maureen Murphy.
You want to just adjust the microphone down there a bit?
Maureen Murphy. Just wanted to draw to your attention, I believe that members of the panel received some documentation with outlining concerns regarding MDS for this rezoning. I hope that everyone received it.
Yes, we do have it. We're going to receive it in another part of the meeting, but
okay.
all members have a copy of it.
Okay, that's all I just wanted to draw your attention to.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
That's for the second application? Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of the current application? And anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the current application? Seeing none, can I get a motion to refer? Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Motion is carried. 3.2, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 125 Mitchell Road, parts of lot 25, concession BF, part 8, plan 21R 255119, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1098. Applicant is John Shearhorn. Owner is 732 676 Ontario Incorporated. Mr. Deming.
So this is the second application for 125 Mitchell Road. This one is in relation to consent applications. Staff note that the two applications were deferred at the last Committee of Adjustment meeting due to concerns around the MDS separation. This is just an introductory for the zoning, so we will be waiting for those issues to be resolved. The two severed parcels that are proposed are in the northeast corner of what you're seeing there on the map. Those will be rezoned to rural residential, so there'll be two severed lots there. The rest of the property itself would all be rezoned to a rural RU zone that would have site-specific zoning regulations on there to basically address the lack of lot area for that. The lot itself, the entirety of the lot is already undersized. The zoning provisions would recognize that. The bottom triangle, what you're seeing on there, that portion of the land is already zoned RU. And then the the horizontal stripes there, that's where it's zoned PA currently. All of this would be rezoned to one zone, which would be an RU zone to recognize the reduced lot area and be more in line with the official plan, which is rural for that area.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Sorry, go ahead.
Just in addition to that, there is under the official plan, there is an environmental protection land running through there in the south. It won't actually affect the severed parcels, but it does affect the main parcel. So staff is in consultation with Quinte Conservation, whether part of that retained parcel will be rezoned to hazard as well.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application?
Again, John Sheeran, I'd like to speak in favor. I know that right now we are, I'm waiting to get some feedback from Greg in regard to the minimum distance separation. So the actual severances might be withdrawn on this property, but I do feel that, again, it would be good to move forward to put it into a rural designation, which is what the official plan is requiring.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Shearhorn on that one? No? Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? And finally, a third time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Okay. Seeing none, I need a motion to refer. Moved by Councillor Culhane, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All in favor? Motion's carried. So I need a motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting. Councillor Sandison, Councillor Kelly, all in favor? It's carried. So moving on to the Plan Advisory Committee. Attendance, I see everyone is here. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, I need confirmation of the minutes of the City Council Planning Committee meeting and Planning Advisory Committee meeting held December 2nd, 2019. Ms. Brown and Mr. Joyce, all in favor? Motion's carried. No deputations, Mr. Clerk? No. So can I get a motion to receive the correspondence from Ray and Jean O'Neill, as well as two pieces of correspondence via email from Richard Cornier? Councillor Sandison, Mr. Baltutis, all in favor? Motion's carried. So referrals from the public meeting, 6.1, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 125 Mitchell Road, part of lot 25, concession 1, parts 1 to 6, plan 21R-255119, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1097. Applicant is John Shearhorn. Owner is 732676 Ontario Incorporated. Policy Planners Report Number PP-2020-04. Resolution reads that report number PP-2020-04 dated January 6, 2020 regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 125 Mitchell Road, part lot 25, concession 1, parts 1 to 6, plan 21R-255119, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering Development Services Department. Councillor Sandison, seconded by Mr. Baltutis. Any questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you, through the chair. So did I hear Mr. Deming say that this had been deferred?
Not this application, it's actually the other one.
Second, yeah, okay. So just to clarify that. Okay, so I do have a question, I go through the report. Just bear with me a sec. Just looking for some clarity. So on page 7, it actually applies to both, this one and the next one. So third paragraph from the bottom, it says, furthermore, the official plan states only residential development that has minimal impact on natural environmental features and the rural character should be permitted. So if you could describe for me a situation where we would see minimal impact. And the reason I asked the question is that water is a concern in that general area. And one of the natural environmental features is in fact water. So if you could describe for me a situation where we would allow, with minimal impact, residential development. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, through the chair. So typically, this is just going to be for one residential lot, so the impact on the hydrogea of the area would be very minimal, be considered very minimal. There's thresholds such as if, say, someone was maybe going to do 4 or 5 residential lots, then that would have a larger impact, and that would be something that maybe a hydrogea study would be required to demonstrate that there was available water, et cetera, on that property. But just for one, it would be considered minimal.
Okay, thank you. Just a supplemental to that. So basically, this application that came before the Committee of Adjustment was in fact, it's 2 separate applications, but it's 2 severances that put 4 lots side by each. And so therefore, we would need to consider the study as you mentioned, and we should consider it in each individual, because it is a sum of 4 if the second application is approved.
Staff?
Okay, so I think if you want sort of policies for that specifically, then that's something that maybe through the official plan update could be something that could be considered where the threshold is. A lot of rural areas don't, like, they consider it a sort of an expense to sort of rural landowners. So, but if that's sort of the wish of the committee and you wanted us to look at coming up with policies of when hydrogeological studies are required, we could look into that as well.
Okay, so no, that's not my intent. My intent is just to really get clarification in terms of what we're dealing with these 2 applications. Thank you.
Councillor Culhane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ashton. Just so I can be clear, I'm looking at the consent application review, which I've given a copy to Mr. O'Brien. Am I understanding it properly that the severance doesn't occur until these conditions are met?
Yeah, so they offer conditions of consent, so then they have to meet each one of those, and then a certificate or whatever could be provided, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? The motion's carried. So 6.2, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 125 Mitchell Road, Part Lot 25, Concession BF, Part 8, Plan 21R-255119, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1098. Applicant is John Shearhorn. Owner is 732676 Ontario Incorporated. Policy Planners Report Number PP-2020-05. The resolution reads that Report Number PP-2020-05 dated January 6, 2020 regarding notice of complete application and introductory to public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 125 Mitchell Road, Part Lot 25, Concession BF, Part 8, Plan 21R-255119, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Need a motion, Councillor Sanderson and Mr. Joyce. Any questions or comments? And we have the letter from the O'Neills that will be considered by staff. All in favor? Motion's carried. Report 7.1, recommendation report for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended, 199 Dundas Street East, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1094. Applicant is Joseph Chaco. Owner is MHSA Properties Limited. Principal Planners Report number PP-2020-01 refers. Resolution reads that Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council, that application B-77-1094 to amend zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended regarding 199 Dundas Street East, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be approved as follows. That zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended be amended by rezoning the subject land from Highway Commercial C3 zone to Highway Commercial C3 zone with special provisions to add medical clinic as a permitted use. Councillor Culhane, Councillor Sanderson, any questions or comments? All in favor? Motion's carried. 7.2, recommendation report for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended, 8 and 12 King Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1095. Owner applicant is UCB Canada. Agent is Investment Management Syndicate Limited. Principal Planners Report number PP-2020-02 refers, and the resolution reads that the Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council. The application B-77-1095 to amend zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended regarding 8 and 12 King Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be approved as follows. That zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended be amended by rezoning the subject land from Highway Commercial C3 zone to General Commercial C2 zone with special provisions to permit a parking lot associated with the property location at 2 Dundas Street West. Need a motion? Ms. Brown, Mr. Baltutis, any questions or comments? Ms. Brown.
Just a clarification, on page 38, under item number 1, it indicates that the city entered into an agreement to exempt the proposed mixed-use building that was there in lieu of payment for parking, and now this application is applying for parking. Does that change the terms that were agreed to and approved April of 2019?
I'll refer that to staff.
So right now, we have a site plan that's ongoing and under review. So whatever the applicant is deficient in parking that doesn't meet the minimum required parking, he would be subject to cash in lieu. So that, no, that wouldn't excuse him. And I don't think this bumps up the parking. He's just sort of using other lands that, for parking, because he has to move his building. In terms of this building, there was a hydro line running near the front of it, so he's had to move it back and shift back the building. So that's why he went and purchased the property to provide parking for this site.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Motion is carried. 7.3, recommendation report for proposed amendment to amendment to the official plan and zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, lots 8 and 9 of registered plan number 124, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1096. Owner is Andy Gertzma, GCL Developments Limited. Applicant is GCL Developments Limited. Agent is Laura Lee Jones, Macaulay Shimomi Housen Limited. Principal Planner's Report number PP-2020-03 refers. The resolution reads that the Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council. That application B-77-1096 to amend the City of Belleville official plan and zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended for lots 8 and 9 of registered plan 124, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be approved as follows. That Schedule B land use plan of the official plan be amended by replacing the open space designation with a residential land use designation and replacing part of the residential land use designation with an open space designation, and that zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended be amended by rezoning the subject land from development DR zone to hazard H zone to low density residential type 1 R127 zone, medium density residential R3 1 and R3 2, R3 3 zone, and high density residential R4-6 zone, community facility CF zone, and hazard H zone to permit 367 residential units of various types and densities, a park, open space, and walkways. Moved by Ms. Brown, seconded by Mr. Joyce. Questions or comments? Mr. Jennings.
Yes, through the chair. I guess it was sort of addressed here from our last meeting, the concerns about the condominium block along the river. I still have some concerns with a couple parts of it. The rezoning of the open space being unequal, so they're removing a large two hectares of open space and redesignating a smaller one open space for the park in the middle of the subdivision. And I know they, I guess they tried to address it by suggesting the undevelopable land around the pond area would make up for that missing open space. To me, that's not developable land, so that doesn't seem like a fair trade where they're giving away land they can't develop anyway and including it as part of the overcoming the 2 hectares where they're going to put the townhouse complex. So to me, that's not really trading open space for open space, I think would be my first concern.
Yeah, so we'll start there.
So in terms of open space, the open space designation is more in, okay, so I guess there's a lot of history involved, but in terms of the official plan, there's probably a lot of land use designations that perhaps when it was done back in the day was, I don't want to say arbitrary, but you know, you're picking up a lot of land use designations that maybe weren't rationalized to the fullest. In terms of planning perspective would be that the open space would be for the purpose of parkland. So in this application, even though the original official plan designation showed a large area for open space, what they required or what we would be able to take is the 5%. So obviously that sort of results in the reduction. In terms of environmental protection area, which is around the pond and the buffer area, I mean, that's still remaining. I think that this is also being done in conjunction with consultation with the Conservation Authority, so I guess in terms, I know, and I'm not sure, like in terms of environmental, I don't know if you're coming at it from an environmental or there should be more parkland, I guess is the question, because,
I guess the main concern would be the reduction in open space. I understand the percentage doesn't need to be the full 2 hectares, so I wouldn't expect that the whole open space would remain
Yeah.
at that. I just want to make sure we're not losing that open space for the sake of the development along the river. The second concern would be the fact that I guess we're taking away, which seems to be an obvious great spot for a park along the city bike path trail system, and putting townhouses there and moving the park to the middle of a field.
yeah, so I think the park itself, and I'm not sure if it's the CF area there, is, I guess that was sort of designed in terms of, I mean, this is going to be an urban area, and so I guess the park in the middle is sort of to be a feature of the subdivision itself, so yes, I recognize there's some advantages to, you know, having natural open space as well, but this is sort of an urban park, I guess. They're creating an urban development. There is connection, even though this isn't on their property, but there will be a connection to the site, to the river walk sort of thing, the trail system as well. I know that's not part of their development lands themselves, but they're facilitating that linkage to the open space area along the river.
And I guess that's kind of what I was getting at, is that, you know, south of the 401, we have urban development, and then we have the path system, but there's large parks all along that south and east, or west side of the river. And I think that the plan is to move forward up along the river with some continuity there. And it seems to me that we're kind of giving away a perfect opportunity to develop parks, so not leaving it in natural state, but developing a nice park adjacent to the city and the riverland like it is south of the 401.
I guess too, in terms of, you know, city strategy, et cetera, like, I mean, I guess that's an option for the city if they wanted to pursue purchasing additional lands as well, sort of idea. I think the application itself that's come forward sort of meets their requirements under the Planning Act. But if the city, I guess that's also something, I mean, the Planning Advisory Committee can make any recommendation to council as well. So, you know, there might be some opportunity to purchase those lands, but that, I guess, would more be a decision of the council, but I guess it's a recommendation that if the committee could make.
Yeah, and I definitely would not be suggesting the city should buy any of that land to make a park, but I think if the developer is already spending money building a park, I think it would be, for the city as a whole, would make more sense to do it adjacent to our existing parks and our intention of a future bike lane up to the north part of the city, I guess would be why we would give away that opportunity. I'm not really understanding.
Part of the process for reviewing these applications is we have a development review team, and they're representatives from each of the departments. So on that development review team are representatives from transportation and operations, which includes the parks, as well as Parks, Recreation, Culture Services. So those two representatives sit on that as well. In terms of their review of this application, they were supportive of the park being in that location. We do have we are in the process of preparing terms of reference for a parks open space recreation master plan as well. So those might be things that could be considered at that point in time as well. But I understand you're talking about this application right now. So.
Okay, well, I guess, thank you for addressing that. I don't think I can agree with this subdivision because of that part, but I also have another concern about that block in the sense that the zoning, they're now applying for R3 special designation, which would put fairly high-density townhouses on that lot as well. Is that correct?
Through the chair, the whole subdivision as a whole will still meet the official plan's low-density guideline of 115 units per hectare. So while typically the R3 zone is what's classified as a medium density, the overall site itself will maintain that low density of the official plan.
Okay, so we're putting the high density beside the natural river instead of near the roads?
On the other side of
It's kind of a
it,
trick way to make it look like it's low density, isn't it? By putting high density where maybe we don't want it from a,
the R4 zone itself, which will be the actual, most likely the highest density portion, will be located next to Farnham Road, which does meet the official plan policies of directing it to major thoroughfares. The other side of it, the R3 zone in the back, that again, it'll be a condo development, but it might be townhouses or singles. Part of what they're introducing with this development is flexible zoning that will allow them to modify between townhouses and singles. So they'll still be hitting that threshold of the low density, whether they end up at, whether it's 342 units or 367, which is currently proposed.
because I guess that was part of my other concern, was that it is somewhat vague. They've asked for special provisions for narrow row housing in that area specifically. So, you know, going with the assumption that's going to be the most desirable place in the neighborhood to live over near the river area, in the more private, that maybe it's going to be popular, and possibly adding even more condominiums into that zone. And I know we can't hold them accountable for the other subdivisions, but I mean, we should be looking at this from a whole. The subdivision to the south has a very large block attached to this one, which has not been subdivided. It is left open, I assume, for the same purpose, for medium density residential. And there is an available piece of land directly north of this subdivision, which would also tie into this townhouse development. And you can see the developer has even left an opening in the road to attach to a future subdivision to the north. So I'm just concerned we're gonna end up with 100-row townhouses stacked up against the river there, which really doesn't lend well for that north development, I don't think, for everybody else. Go ahead.
So in terms of the connectivity, so the lands to the north of Scott Drive are not the full lands, but there's part of those lands that are still part of the urban boundary. So I think one of the most important things is, as in our role, is to make sure that there's connectivity within that subdivision to expand. So if there was some showing some roads going into that was so that
Yeah. There's a
there wasn't-
tiny landlocked spot just north of the of these townhouses.
yeah.
The only way to get there would be through these townhouses, yeah. So I assume that will at some point get,
And that
developed,
would,
that's-
yeah, and so that's probably something that the land owner has the opportunity to speak to or provide comment as well. So yeah, this is going to be a plan of condominium, so it'll be, it'll technically, in most likelihood, it'll be the last part of the development. Again, the maximum for this is 367 units is what is being proposed. So for the overall subdivision. And I guess in terms of impact, environmental impact, it'll be done in conjunction with the, it'll be an area that the Conservation Authority would be an interested party as well. So that part of the development would be done in conjunction with, you know, their feedback and their approval as well, so.
okay, so now do we get their concerns or any of that discussion, or as far as the Conservation Authority on how much they look into it? I guess I'm I'm not quite sure, and I think some of my fellow councilors here weren't quite sure about exactly how close the corner of this lot is, but it sure looks like it's 15 meters from the Moira River is the back corner of that townhouse complex, which seems really close to the river, I guess, to me, for a parkway behind there.
Through the chair, I did measure it really briefly earlier today when we had someone in that provided comments. I think at the narrowest point, it was about 35 meters from the actual river point.
From the water's edge, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, that was a rough measurement, but I went from the narrowest point on there.
Okay, so it's 15 meters from the 100-year flood. Okay, so this one, right, okay, right there. So in flooding time, yeah, there might not be any path there. Okay. Okay, I guess all I can say is I don't like that whole part of the subdivision. I will not be voting for this subdivision because of that part. I love the rest of the subdivision, and I think it's great that it's got all those mixed uses, et cetera, but I just, I don't think that's the right way to move along the river for those subdivisions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Joyce, I believe I saw your hand.
Yes, and we talked a lot about it, so I won't chat about the staff did answer one part of my question, but I guess we've got multiple issues here. One is affordable housing, we talked about the last time, so I think they've tried to come back and re-emphasize that, so that has to be taken into consideration in this proposal. But I think the one thing, and I don't disagree with your comments, Mr. Jennings, but the concern I have is we moved the open space to something that's probably more central to the whole subdivision now. Before, it was close to the water. It was going to be ideal for those living there, but I think the idea by moving it to the middle then makes it more accessible for everybody. I know it's not ideal, and I know the venue near the water would be ideal, but this now makes it more desirable for the whole community. And the other thing, we're so used to in planning, paying the 5% in lieu of, it's nice to see for a change that we're actually getting a park in a subdivision as opposed to cash in lieu of. So it's multiple requirements here, and I think they've done the best to try to meet all of that. So in response, I will be supporting this. Just, it's not ideal, but I think it meets most of the boxes here, in my opinion.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through the chair. And just to add to the committee comment and conversation from the correspondence we have from the owner of the business across the river. So, Mr. Deming, if you, through the chair, if you can just comment on that, and perhaps if you had a photo, if you could circulate that, just so people can see what that's about.
Yeah, through the chair, I'll circulate the photo. No, just the one photo around. So the concerns were from the business across the river, specifically regarding the view of the trees, the tree line, and basically they didn't want to see houses protruding through, which would ruin the view of their patio. What we've been able to confirm through that photo is that the subject lands itself do not actually have any of these trees on it. All these trees are on the lands that are actually to the east of that and in between the subject lands and the Moira River. So there won't be any loss of trees that are currently existing there.
Yeah.
So to confirm, and that land is held by another company, and what is that zoned as right now?
I have to double check, but I believe it's hazard and community facility.
And so would that, obviously, just from other things that come through this committee, it would have to come from this committee to change that, is that correct?
Any type of redevelopment on hazard lands would have to be rezoned away from hazard. It doesn't allow anything, so yes, it would have to go through this committee.
Okay, so further to that, we talked about land being used for trails and systems and having a buffer. Do we currently have a plan with trails through those lands right now? Or do we have city trails supposed to be going through there?
So
That-
yeah, there is a plan to connect that whole riverfront areas of walking trail.
And I think to that, I think to Mr. Jennings' point, I'd like to make sure this is referred to the Parks and Rec Master Plan discussions and further from this committee or recommendations to council where necessary, just so I think we have that in further discussion. I think to the points Mr. Jennings made, having that land and its use in discussion through council is going to be important, I think, for any further trail development from Parks and Rec. And I think the owner also from the business across the way mentioned something about, there were talk from community members about having some kind of bridge eventually, a talk about having that connection over the Moira around from that center. And I think, you know, talking about this whole project, I am going to support it. I think it is great for a number of reasons. I think that they've really talked about a number of the issues that had come up. But it is, you know, it's 367 mixed homes in this development across from an area that from the official plan we're identifying as also 800 new homes going into, and that's development of Thurlow and Corbyville and that whole region. I think it's really important for the city. Another part of this, because what's important with the parks conversation also with the bike trail and the trail component is it's good for council and for this committee to think about the connection of those pathways sooner than later, meaning that if this is going to start, we're going to want to make sure that we have connections. Residents are going to want to see more bike lane connection eventually, even though we don't have that in Thurlow. Right now in Thurlow, we're working on transportation, and that's something Mr. Sanderson had talked about before. But I think it's also important that we acknowledge that there is land there that has somewhat of an informal pathway and probably will be developed further. But we want to make sure that in the future for Belleville, as we approve this division, that we also are looking that are making sure that council's aware that there's pathways that are there, and there's lands right now that are not necessarily protected. They're held, sure there's a holding or there's a zoning on there that protects them, but they're not owned by the city, and that could change any day. So I just want to make sure those points are noted wherever they need to be, but other than that, I think it's great and I'll support it.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Jennings, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, sure. I guess I was just going to further the point about the park. And I agree with you in the sense that it's great to see a park in the middle of the neighborhood, but I think that it's looking too small. I think we have to look at that whole community, and that's what that linear park would provide, not just this subdivision with access to a park, is what I would argue against moving it to that central location.
Okay. Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So I certainly am in favor of this proposal, and the discussion around the park, there is also a park already in existence in the Caniff Mills subdivision. So I guess my comment on the parks, it doesn't belong here, but maybe you can take it back to the Parks and Rec. It's one thing to allot the land for the park. It's another thing to develop it and provide the equipment and resources to be able to use it. So I'd like that to go back. In terms of the plan itself, the only thing I would say I'm a little disappointed in is that there's no apartment buildings. They make a statement that it's not the intent. It permits apartment buildings, which is not the intent of the proposal. So really, we've got townhouses and single-family homes. So I just think that it's just a missed opportunity, that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Denny.
Through the chair to Councillor Sanderson, the R4 block that's in the northwest portion of the development there, that zone there is going to be split. It could allow for an apartment development or a townhouse development there as well. The R4 zone does allow for an apartment. I think the developer itself is waiting on the market conditions to dictate what they put there.
Okay, so maybe I'm misreading the report. But on page 68, second paragraph, the last statement says, the R4 zone also permits apartment buildings, which is not the intent of the proposal. So I took it from that statement that there's no apartment buildings coming forward, but maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Just speaking on that specific one, that was referring to the why the R3 zone is used throughout. There's 3 new R3 zones that are being added. The R3 zone doesn't typically permit townhouses, but they didn't want to put high-density zoning throughout the development for a number of reasons. One being they didn't want to allow apartments throughout the entirety of the development, so that's why they used R3. That's what that paragraph is referring to. That little block in the northwest corner, that would have the potential for an
So
apartment
there is
there.
still the opportunity. Okay,
Yes,
great.
correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Culhane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment, that's excellent discussion, and certainly Mr. Jennings touched on my own concerns. While I recognize that we have to grow, and change is disconcerting for many people for many reasons, we have to grow. But Councillor Sanderson has made the point before, and I'm twigged again, there are no applications for apartment buildings. These homes, I'm sure, will be lovely, but they'll be beyond the reach of many, many people. So I think Councillor Sanderson has asked this question before, but forgive me, I'm going to ask it again. Do we have any control, or will we ever have any control over the type of housing that is built beyond approving applications?
Good question.
So we obviously, as council, have no control over the price of what houses sell for, or what townhouses sell for. There is usually a good correlation between the more density, or sort of like if a townhouse typically might be less than a single detached dwelling. Typically. You can have some high-end townhouses too, but so there is that correlation, because land value is a huge cost of a house. So the less land you need, then the cost of in theory, the cost is going down. But largely, though, this is a market. This is market driven. I think the council is looking towards the housing community improvement plan to provide incentives, and it's possible that those incentives could also apply to, say, that land that R4X. My eyes need to get checked, I think. But anyway, so R4X. So I mean, it's possible that that could be affordable housing, but that would be the choice of the developer. That wouldn't, that would not be something council has control over.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the application? I'll just briefly say that council approving the master plan for parks and open spaces is critical, so that we can develop an overall view of our entire municipality, which then, when we get into the specific applications, we have that framework in which to work from. Because as has been pointed out, a lot of the land along the riverfront is not owned by the city. Ideally, we would like to at some point. I think that's the plan, and something we'll have to look into. We're also looking at connectivity under the 401, and that's been budgeted to start that planning process as well. So certainly the appetite of council is to move in that direction, but I think once we have that framework, it'll be much easier then to add the specific planning applications to that framework and decide how we want to lay out parks. I certainly agree with the more natural vegetation look to parks. If you look at Boyd Park in Deerfield, for example, it's all built within a natural setting, and there is a small, very small, but small trail network within there, which I know that the neighbors there appreciate the natural setting. So it can be done, and I think that's something that we'll see as a larger framework, and then it'll be much easier for us to look at applications and make sure that our parks fit into our active transportation network. So, and then that way it'll be less piecemeal. So I certainly appreciate the comments that have been made about the condominiums, and certainly we want to preserve as much buffer along our our river. Certainly vegetation along our river, I know for myself and Councillor Kelly, and I know Councillor Millet as well, sitting on Quinte Conservation, maintaining that vegetation along the river is critical, particularly on flood events and things of that nature. The more root system you have, the better chances you have of preserving your shoreline. So these are things we need to look at to make sure we're not clear cutting right to our river's edge and we're actually maintaining some of that rural and natural vegetation. So these are certainly good comments. I think we're moving in the right direction on that front. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? That motion's carried. Information matters, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment monitoring report, report to January 6, 2020. Can I get a motion to receive? Councillor Culhane, Councillor Kelly, any questions or comments on any of that? Seeing none, all in favor? Our motion's carried. General business and inquiries. Anybody have any? Nope, seeing none. I just got a closing statement. The Planning Advisory Committee's applicable decisions will be forwarded to City Council for consideration, forming part of the agenda for the City Council meeting to be held at a future date. With that, I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Culhane, Mr. Baltudis, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.